La integración entre países latinoamericanos ha sido un anhelo histórico para la región.
The integration between countries in the region has always been a dream, and now it is critical to trade and the economic recovery. CAF, Bank of Development of Latin America, presents the Report of Economy and Development for 2021, Roads to Integration, Facilitation of Trade, Infrastructure, and Global Value Chains. A document that analyzes the different causes of the low regional integration and proposes concrete actions of the facilitation of trade, infrastructure, and productive integration. Please visit www.bioteca.cap.com and download the document. How are you? Good morning. She's greeting everyone in Guarani. I am Carmen Ruiz, and on behalf of CAF, Development Bank of Latin America, and the Ministry of Finance of Paraguay, I'm very pleased to welcome you to the regional presentation of the Report on Economy and Development 2021, Routes to Integration, Trade Facilitation, Infrastructure, and Global Value Chains, which is taking place in Asunción within the framework of the 174th CAF Board of Directors and 53rd Ordinary Meeting of the 20th Extraordinary Meeting of Shareholders of CAF. Today, we will be joined by prominent speakers to discuss the integration and trade liberalization as an effective instrument to achieve the goal of greater shared prosperity in Latin America and the Caribbean. We encourage you, meanwhile, to share your views on social media at AgendaCAF and also hashtag RedCAF on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We are broadcasting this in Spanish, Guarani, English, and Portuguese from our website, caf.com, and our YouTube channel. Next, we will kick off this event by inviting up to the stage Mr. Oscar Llamosas, Minister of the Treasury of Paraguay, and Mr. Sergio Díaz Granados, Executive President of CAF, as well as Carolina España, Executive Vice President of CAF.
Bienvenidos.
Welcome. Next, the words of Mr. Sergio Díaz Granados, CAF Executive President. Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry, I cannot hear him. Avisa que no llega el audio, por favor. No llega el audio. We are very sorry, we cannot hear him. This is one of the most important meetings that CAF does every year. It's covering several topics of importance for the region, and in this case, one that is implicit to the existence of CAF, which is integration. And we do this presentation also during this special event for us, Mr. Llamosas, because it is the first time in the history of Paraguay in CAF that we have our own board and our meeting held in Asunción. We also do this event within the framework of the commemorance of the collegiate organisms and bodies of CAF, the board, and the meeting, the general meeting. And tomorrow we will also have an interesting session with the board here in Asunción. But I think the most important thing is the discussion on the increment of capital of CAF. Being in Asunción today and tomorrow is a historical decision of the members of CAF and betting on the future of Asunción so that this red network can always be known for the content and for this district in the history. So I want to thank you again for your time. And thank you for the warm welcome and the affection that we have received from the first day here in Paraguay and the warmth of the people of Paraguay. We have felt the special warmth. You have been excellent hosts, dedicated. We hope that today and tomorrow, these 2 days, we can be as fortunate. And I don't want to start without mentioning what we did yesterday, Sunday, with CONMEBOL and with your presence, Minister, and your team, of using sports as a factor for social transformation and cultural transformation in Latin America and the Caribbean. Yesterday, we went to CONMEBOL, as CAF, to use that tool that moves the emotions of Latin America to seek gender equality and inclusion, further inclusion. Tomorrow is the day of the International Women's Day, and we will launch our strategy for gender equality from Paraguay, and that will help us mark the beginning of this new, what CAF is, the new chapter of CAF, and why we are here and why we came to Asunción. And we hope that next year, with your presence and the board and with the whole Paraguay team leading the board of CAF, can go beyond in what we have proposed collectively. We want to have a more solid, prosperous region. I want to anticipate simply the challenges that it's a spoiler alert, but I want to talk about the challenges. There's a lot of effort from the integration of this region, international integration, trade tools. CAF began in parallel in 1978 with two main pillars: sustainable development and regional integration. And the last 54 years, we've been evolving from a continental bank. We've always had integration in the heart of the organization. That is why this document is so important, this red document, because it points out where the progress is and where the deficiencies are for integration. There's four, first of all, we have to look at customs to facilitate trade. That is one of the big challenges that we see in the document. Next, we have to provide more integration and infrastructure for the regional integration. Number three, we have to adapt the domestic and regional adaptation for a productive integration. And number four is sustainability for the climate, for the environment. I mean, the document covers these four dimensions, and imagining how that integration moves forward. And what do we want to do of CAF? And this we will discuss with the board again tomorrow, but at least we want to leave these, we want to reiterate what we mentioned in Cartagena. We want to talk about four dimensions. On the one hand, infrastructure and sustainable infrastructure. We will do more investment with our countries in the borders, physical infrastructure, more opportunities for energy integration and digital integration. Next, we want to facilitate trade in the border. We want to promote interregional tourism as well, not only services, but also trade. We want to bet on this new phase, on this new integration. We wanted to come with a renewed climate change agenda. And finally, a development of a common space, especially for e-commerce and a unique digital market for Latin America. That is what CAF wants to do in the next 5 years. So with these central ideas, Minister, we want to open this. This is our flagship document for this year. And we also want to encourage the participants to keep feeding us with proposals, with ideas of how, from CAF, we can contribute more to the regional integration and the commercial integration and the energy integration of our nations. Thank you very much and welcome.
Muchas.
Thank you, President. Next, we will have the words of Minister of the Treasury, Mr. Oscar Llamusas. Good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you in the launch of this document, the presentation of this report. First of all, I would like to say hello to Sergio Diaz Granados, Executive President of the Development Bank of Latin America, CAF, and all of the authorities of the bank who are here today. I also want to greet the national authorities and the representatives of the private sector and the public sector who are here today, the special guests, all of the people that are following us through the social media as well. We are really honored and pleased to have you in our countries, to have the representatives of the bank, of all the members of the different governments to present this report today of the economy and development, which is called the Road to Integration, Facilitation of Trade, Infrastructure, and Value Chains. To know and participate in the presentations of this type of report of high technical quality is always, I do this with great optimism. There's a global focus which allows us to see the performance of the region and of a country in relative terms, what is translated into valuable tools to seek to work together with other countries in the continent. Historically, trade and integration have been important engines for the development of the economies. Through them, we create opportunities, employment, and we reduce the gap of poverty. Over a billion people have left the poverty gap thanks to the economic sustainable growth based on economic trade in the last years. Nonetheless, this this has been weakened in the last years. The after the crisis of 2008, there has been a deacceleration. There's been less growth in the global GDP in this last years with COVID-19 really put us to the test. And the international cooperation measures were activated, logistics and supply chains of international trade. These negative shocks showed the differences even more in Latin America, especially in structure that are part of trade. Along these lines, CAF highlights in the report the need to encourage interregional trade and global trade that is more dynamic and that complements a global expansion um, strategy. In the case of Paraguay, interregional commerce is important, especially for the members of Mercosur, which has represented 46% of the trade in the last 2 years. We see opportunities and spaces, room for improvement in the other countries of Latin America. In the study, we mentioned several fronts, several important fronts that we have to bear in mind, or all countries have to bear in mind in order to encourage regional and global trade, ease trade, infrastructure, and value chains. In these aspects, I would like to mention some measures that Paraguay has been articulating: the study of costs and measures to facilitate trade through a national committee of facilitation of trade. In the same way, we are encouraging negotiations of agreements of strategic economic associations in order to generate an institutional framework to encourage the trade of services, investment, and also encouraging economic cooperation and the support to SMEs. We also highlight among these actions the work on the mapping and systematizing of processes led by representatives of the public and private sectors, and the most important thing from the from the infrastructure is a bioceanic corridor, which has strategic value for Paraguay because it will transform the region into a logistics hub. It will be the shorter place between Chile and Brazil on the Atlantic, among other actions that our country is leading. But beyond the representative actions that we mentioned, it is clear that there's still a long road ahead, and on that road, allies like the CAF will be very important to reach our goals. 2022 will be again a year of many challenges with climate change that affects our countries, such as droughts, logistics crisis, hardening, the toughening of the external conditions. So once again, we will need determined, coordinated decisions and taking advantage of all the opportunities that may arise within the region. Before these challenges, the National Economic Team, led by the Ministry of the Treasury, will strengthen the intelligent insertion of Paraguay into the world as a valid and strategic way to looking for economic growth. Thank you very much.
Gracias, ministro, por sus palabras.
Thank you for everyone for these opening words. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and also Facebook. You can follow Agenda CAF and you can share your experiences with the hashtag RedCAF. Also, starting now, we will read the report of 2021, Pathways for the Integration, Facilitation of Trade Infrastructure and Global Value Chains. To start, we have presented a video on the report that we have presented. We'll show you a video now. What are the main challenges that Latin America and the Caribbean face in order to reach a higher level of integration that encourages productivity and well-being in our countries? Even though beyond the openness measures that many states have implemented in the last 3 decades, there still are important opportunities to improve global and local trade to benefit the population. How effective have the tax reductions and non-tax barriers been to encourage interregional trade? The trade agreements amongst the country have reduced the barriers significantly in Latin America and the Caribbean. So basically 85% of the trade has been freed. Nonetheless, these measures have not generated a significant amounts or increases in the interregional trade, that is about 15% of the total exports since mid-90s. While in Europe, it's been 60%, and in North America, it's 45%, and in the East and Southeast of Asia, 35%. How does the closeness of the countries in Latin America, what impact does it have in the trade? Distance is a negative, affects trade negatively in Latin America more than in Europe or in the Southeast of Asia or in North America. This means that there are other costs related to customs, levies, tariffs, barriers, and the infrastructure, transport infrastructure is also relevant. These factors and the regulations that affect the productive chains explain for the low participation of regional value chains, which also reduces trade within Latin America. How do we compare the trade and integration of Latin America and the Caribbean with other regions and commercial blocs? The participation of Latin America in the exports has not grown since 1980. We have remained at 5%. This contrasts heavily with Southeast Asia that went from 3.5% to 7.5% in the same period of time. RED 2021 proposes a restructuring of 3 pillars on the road to integration of Latin America and the Caribbean. Initiatives to facilitate trade that simplify and digitize the customs and border red tape. If this is adopted in the context of the free trade agreements, this would be of great profit to the nations. Investment in infrastructure of transport necessary to improve the physical integration of the countries. Encourage domestic or local domestic regulations and regional regulations. Encourage the production within the countries and regional value chains. In the last 25 years, CAF has financed 86 projects for physical integration with a total investment of $32 million, of which 39% was direct financing of CAF. The integration processes are essential for the recovery of trade and the development of our economies. To present this report, we're with Yana Loop. He's the main economist of the social economy uh, network of, he's got a PhD by the Carlos III Madrid University and a master's in economy in the same university. He's also a bachelor's of economy in Córdoba, Argentina. His interests are focused on the macroeconomic aspects and international trade in emerging economies. Go ahead, Liam. Carmen, welcome. Welcome, everyone. Good morning. It's a pleasure for me to present this report, Pathways to Integration. It is a flagship report of CAF. And the first thing that we wonder is why is the insertion so important? The main thing is that it allows other countries to expand and sell their products as well as buying supplies, as well as it promotes scale economies in the production, which reduces the cost and increases the productivity. And also, it promotes innovation um, of local companies and vice versa. All of this promotes and encourages productivity and well-being. Now, what role is there for the regional integration in this global integration? Well, regional integration can be an instrument that is very important to promote this insertion. First of all, because it promotes the integration of global value chains that have a regional component that is very important. And next, because once we reduce the tariffs, other tariffs, the transport costs and the border start being more relevant. Therefore, the advantages of physical closeness increase. With this in mind, the countries of Latin America and the Caribbean, starting or with especially since the 90s, had started to sign and promote openness, and this has this resulted in better tariffs. You can see in the more developed nations, such as the ones of the OECD, how in Latin America and the Caribbean in general, in Paraguay particularly, the tariffs applied have dropped significantly. Something to highlight is that in Latin America and in Paraguay, the levels are still higher than in the developed nations, so there is still room for growth. There's still road ahead, and this we can see not because of the tariffs within the subregions of Latin America that in region are almost zero, but with the extra regional tariffs that are still higher than those of other agreements. Now, this larger openness and this tariff reduction has not brought an increase, a sustained increase in the exports that have gone from 52 to 62% of the GDP of the total trade, and trade as with percentages such as participation in the exports, the global exports has maintained since 1980, has maintained the same. This is not the case of Paraguay, which has had a more important dynamism where be, besides this reduction of the tariffs, there has been important work such as the hydroway or the hydroelectric power plants to contribute to this more dynamism of trade and exports. In Paraguay, total trade has gone from 32 to almost 60% of the GDP in the same period. So Paraguay has seen more growth, as Damosas has mentioned. Now, what can be behind this, the international trade growth reduction? Well, part of the explanation is that this sort of pause is due to the low level of intra-regional trade, which was already low from 95 to 99, significantly lower than, and has not increased in the last 20 years. except in Dominican Republic and other in Central America, the other regions have remained the same. So as we said before, interregional trade can be a vehicle to promote, and this is explained especially because interregional trade is very important in the productive integration and the participation in global value chains. The participation in a global value chain and the fragmentation of the production is, well, there's something being produced, and these different stages are done in the different countries of the world. Now, what we have read always is that many of these stages are produced in countries that are close to each other. So these value chains are global, but there's a strong regional component, and they encourage the trade of supply of goods within the regions. Now, when you look at the sub-regions, the subsections of Latin America, if and when some regions are open, the value of trade or the value of the local goods and the exported goods is still very low, and even lower, much lower than when you compare them to the regions of reference. Paraguay stands out in this sense in two dimensions. On the one hand, it does show a low level of openness measured by the use of global exported goods, but it does have an important regional integration because of the goods that are imported. Many of them come from countries of the region. So the challenge for Paraguay is to try to insert their companies in global value chains. And this has been a big step in the regional integration. Now we need to open up more to the world, or to insert those countries, excuse me, those companies into the world. So what happens, or what can be behind these high costs of trade? Well, what we do, or what we have done as of data of trade within and without the countries, is to try to infer what the implicit costs are starting from this information. And this graph shows measures of proximity in 1995, which are the gray points, in 2015, which are the red points. The proximity is that one could see it as the cost of trade, and the extra regional proximity of the. So what we see is in the reference, as in Latin America and the Europe or Southeast of Asia, there has been an increase interregionally and outside the region, and there's more of a. What we see here is that the internal external taxes have decreased, but especially the trade costs internally. Central America has a similar pattern, but of less magnitude. If you see this, the length of the arrow is a bit shorter. Now, in this sense, South America stands out when we have had a slight increase of but the interregional proximity has decreased, and this could be indicating that the interregional costs have not dropped in the same magnitude than in the extra-regional ones, and it could be that they have increased. So again, this shows a road in the reduction of costs in the region that encourage trade, especially interregional trade. So what can we do to promote the integration regionally and globally? We can work on the global costs. And what are these global costs? This is the tariffs, the non-tariff barriers, the costs, the infrastructure, and other regulations that affect the integration and the participation of global value chains, as can be these. What this report will do is focus on the last three: facilitation of infrastructure, trade, and other regulations that could affect the participation of global value chains. This is the index. I'll go by quickly just to share how it measures, the economy measures the evolution of international trade. It uses the gravitational focus in parallel with what the gravitational focus does. So what does this say? That the trade flows increase with the size of the economies, and by size is expense and GDP, and it's reduced or diminishes with the distance and other frictions that affect trade. which could be structure like the geography or the language, and other frictions that are public policies such as tariffs or infrastructure that make this physical distance to be more or less effective. If we reduce these tariffs and if we invest more in infrastructure, the distances could be shortened. So using this, what we do is measure first how the variation of interregional trade has been for different regions of the world. And we see that in all of the regions, there has been more interregional trade of manufacturing in some regions, such as the southeast of Asia or the market in the south. And also what we study is what has determined this change in the interregional trade. And the size has been one of the main determinants. In all of the regions, they have applied about 60% more. In Europe, it's been about a third. And the trade policy, preferential, not preferential, has had a big role in almost all of the region, except in the Mercosur with the preferential policy, is the Mercosur agreement and other free trade agreements that have been signed have played in favor of this higher increase of the interregional trade, but the non-preferential policy with one, the ones that with one doesn't have agreements with have reduced trade. So in this sense, Mercosur has some work to do. They have to try to open up to the world and reduce the costs of trade with the countries they don't have free trade agreements with. Finally, what we do is see what has been the distance or how we've explained this. And for this, we use the data again and the estimates coming from gravitational model of commerce, of trade, and the average, the higher the distance or the more distance, the less trade there will be. But what we do is try to identify how that distance plays in the different instances, especially in Latin America. And what we see is this effect of this distance is more intense or becomes more intense for trade in Latin America. So this distance that is playing a more important role in Latin America, which again aims at high costs of transport and trade within the region. This is all in interregional trade. So, as we said in the beginning, what can we do to reduce these costs? Well, the report has three pillars. One is facilitating trade. And what is facilitating trade? Facilitating trade is the simplifying, harmonizing, and digitizing and standardizing of the procedures or the paperwork that is necessary for foreign trade. So, how can we see how well the countries are doing with regards to facilitating trade? Well, the first thing is to measure what is the cost with regards to time and money to do a standard operation of foreign trade. What we can see in these two graphs is that the different subregions of Latin America have a more elevated cost than regions such as the US or Canada or the European Union in money and in time. The dotted lines in this area show that Paraguay is also aligned with a region with higher costs than these regions of reference. Another way of coming close to how well the countries are facilitating trade is with the index of the OECD that measure 11 dimensions. In this sense, Latin America is not very well, but within Latin America, there's alliances with the Pacific and are closer to the countries of reference like Venezuela, Honduras, or Bolivia, who still have a long road ahead. Paraguay is in the middle where we're still room for improvement for trade facilitation, and this is what Paraguay is doing in Latin America, Mercosur, and the other dimensions. And we see that there's still room for improvement in some dimensions, such as the participation of trade and the automation of the processes. So, what can the countries do to promote facilitation of trade? There's different initiatives, and one is the single window, which is a single platform for foreign trade, and the region has advanced a lot in, and there are countries like Costa Rica that have single windows, the first level single windows, and these initiatives are unilateral. A country could do this outside the agreements. The agreements could complement these measures, allowing for the interoperability of the single windows. And this would help reduce costs and times for foreign trade. Same thing happens with the authorized operator, which are companies that are certified to lead foreign trade operations. That means the amount of controls that are necessary to import or export. And again, here the trade agreements could have more relevance. So if and when these initiatives are for unilateral openness, the agreements could help complement this and make this even more significant. Then are other initiatives, such as local transport, which allows to reduce paperwork and just trade. Sorry. The next chapter is the role of transport infrastructure. Why is the transport infrastructure important as a fundamental component of the costs of trade? Well, to sell or buy a good, we have to be able to take it from where it was produced to the port from which it will leave out to the world, and then from the port of destination to the place where it will actually be used. So here you see that infrastructure has a big role in this process, and the ports as well. The nodes where the necessary nodes are for import and export are very important, and many times that's where the bottlenecks are, and the infrastructure of the neighbor or the other party also plays a role in determining the costs for trade or exports. Now, these transport costs are more visible, as I was saying in the beginning, once we reduce the tariffs and other barriers that are not taxes. And again, what this allows is to reduce the distance, the physical distance, and make it more effective. And here again, the the geographic closeness could be an advantage. So good infrastructure would allow us to make the best of the physical proximity. What are the components, the key components of the transport costs? Why is it important to have to understand how the infrastructure? Okay, first, because there's a network structure. This means that when we improve a connection with the network, we not only reduce the cost of times but there's the times also change, and the costs also change the whole network. Also because it's got a different composition. There's different types of transport: land, air, water. We have to have a strategy that takes the best of the advantages of each type of transport. And finally, because as I mentioned before, the network of transport has links and nodes. Links, you can think of the roads, and the nodes are the borders, the airports. Many times what happens is that we improve the link, but the bottleneck is in the nodes. So there we've got long queues in the airports, or the borders or the bridges, and this reduces the profit in times and costs. So it's necessary to have this integrated approach of improving the links and the nodes. About the amount and the location determines the time and the variability. And this is very important for the productive integration because the companies need to plan their productive process in an efficient way. Therefore, the variability it goes against them, and the levels of costs also are against. So, a good infrastructure, good transport infrastructure would allow them to plan their productive process even better and to be part of neighboring countries or countries outside the region. So, the impact of the transport costs are heterogeneous by sectors and by regions. It's not the same. The transport costs are not the same for fresh food that needs or that has less time to get from A to B than for non-perishable uh, food that can spend more time on the road. So these costs affect the everything differently. What are these trade costs like in the interregional and extra-regional? In interregional trade, what we see is that South America has transport costs that are 15 points above the European Union. This is not so for Central America and the Caribbean. And these transport costs, I forgot to mention, are measured by the margins, CIF and FOB. And this, we do not see the margins. We are also aiming at that we still have a long road ahead with regards to the infrastructure that can connect us with the neighbors. Now, what can be behind these high costs of interregional trade? Number one, it can be a composition or what type of transport we use for trade. And what we see here is that Latin America has a participation that is almost exclusive in maritime trade, and it contrasts with Central America and Mexico, where coffee has a huge role, and with the United States, where coffee and other transport nodes are also there and they're important for trade. In the United States, maritime transport or freight is still important. Now, when we look at interregional trade, we see a contrast of the United States and Central America of the because in South America, water freight is still 50% of the interregional trade in transport by roads is still important, while in the United States, transport by roads is almost 60% of interregional trade and air freight, but water freight is quite low within the region. So again, this shows that we could improve the road transport or roads so that we could reduce the costs in the region. What we do then to come close to these costs in the region, within the region, is see what are the times, the travel times, and how many people a company could have access to in different areas, and also to do an exercise of saying, okay, what would be the profit if the transport could go 90 kilometers per hour in those roads? And we do this for an internal connectivity. This is connecting the main cities of each country without bearing in mind the neighbors, and with the external connectivity, bearing in mind the main cities. And what we see here is that Latin America cities and the Caribbean cities would have huge profits, or they could have much more profit and increase the average speed at 90 kilometers per hour in Bolivia, and Paraguay is in the middle. It could increase 50% more markets if they did these reforms. Now, the external connectivity has a fundamental advantage for the countries that have small domestic markets, such as Paraguay, Bolivia, or Uruguay. In these parts, the access to markets of the neighboring countries allows them to expand their markets even much more, and therefore it could reach a larger number of consumers. If all of the countries carried out these reforms, that Paraguay could, or the profit and the access to markets of Paraguay would be about 10 times the internal markets of Paraguay. So there's a lot of room for growth in countries with small local markets if they carried out these improvements. You can say, well, yeah, is this the same for every country? Well, what we see is that we do this exercise for the US and Spain. And what we see is that for the US and Spain, the profit is almost zero. So right now, we we can go at 90 kilometers per hour in those countries. This could be a goal or an aspiration. So what can we do to improve the transport infrastructure to support the integration? Well, first is how much are we investing? If you look at the level of investments of GDP, Latin America invests about as much as OECD countries. Now, Latin America is investing. Now, we have less money. So the level of expense to invest in infrastructure is less. And that is where priority projects is relevant. And that is where we propose to work on a group of infrastructure that contemplates an integral vision of the transport, bearing in mind tertiary and secondary ways and nodes of transport and or transshipment, sorry. And this focus on logistics corridors has an important presence in the countries, in the development plans of the nations, and especially in the multilateral organisms, including CAF. Also, we have to look for a balance between new works, replacement of infrastructure, and place an emphasis on and this allows that the quality of the infrastructure or the level of the infrastructure can be at an elevated level throughout the life of the project. So it's important to do new works, but it's also important to upkeep and achieve a high level of quality of infrastructure of transport throughout the life. Finally, the cooperation and the coordination that is needed so that the countries that can lead these infrastructure ways, and that's where the multilateral bodies and the development can have a fundamental role as it has had with with the evolution of these processes. Where transport costs are have a fundamental role is the regional or energy regional integration. Why is the energy integration important? Well, because of the benefits. One is that they are scale economies and they reduce the production costs. Number two is because they help to mitigate risks and volatility in supply and demand. And number three, because they allow to diversify the productive chain and therefore they help the sustainability of the environment if we can reduce fuels or fossil fuels, whether they're energy types of energy that pollute less, it's much better. We need a network, we need a grid to exchange the energy and a regional framework. Now, this energy integration has certain obstacles. One of them is the quest for energy sovereignty, that all of the countries want to produce as much or have to produce as much energy as they can, and the trade of energy ends up being opportunity and surplus. There's nothing that, well, we could think that it is an asset just as any other. And another thing is the weakness of the institutions that has not allowed us to respect the contracts that were signed, and so the countries cannot have trade in energy as a policy, especially the absence of mechanisms to solve controversies. Whenever there was an issue in an agreement that was signed, it was not clear how to solve it. Now, what has the evolution? How has evolution been in energy? And here, Okay, trade because of interconnection. In the graph, it's we do not mention the hydro power plant. So in Central America, the trade was very reduced in 2009, and after signing the regional energy market, the energy trade has increased, and we have identified exporters of energy. In the southern cone, if and when it seems that there are similar levels, bear in mind that the countries are larger economies. So, with regards to domestic use, these volumes are a smaller proportion than Central America. So, in the southern cone, there has been trade by interconnection, a trade of opportunities again, of surplus energy, except as in the case of Uruguay, where starting after the investment of non-conventional renewable energies, they have positioned themselves as a net exporter of energy. And the Andean region has had a trade of opportunities where, depending on the climate and other conditions, it has export, or every country has been a net exporter or net importer. Here we have to highlight Paraguay, where there has been reduced trade, but it's got a very important, I mean, it is, energy is important in the goods or services as of the exports of energy of the hydroelectric power plants of Itaipu and Yacyretá. And these are the amounts that were exported in 2009 and 2019 by hydroelectric power plants that, as you can see, are at higher levels than interconnecting and trade by interconnection. Now, Paraguay has a challenge here in improving the interconnection or the networks that I understand they are working on, so that they can make the best, if they wanted to, of the generation it has as of the production of these hydroelectric plants, and that would also allow us to export to other countries if it wanted to, and not only to Argentina or Brazil. So using the model, the gravitational trade model, we also see what the determinants have been in with energy trade. And what we can see is that energy trade has been determined by factors by demand, by the distance, by the prices of the energy. Always that if and when the conditions are present, the supply, and what are they? Well, that we have lower sources and that we have energy reserves. So we've got the conditions, but we need that. We have we have the demand, but we have to have the supply as well. So what are the challenges of policies for the energy integration? Well, first of all, regulatory harmonization that will allow us to have a regional framework of commerce or trade by interconnection, also institutions to solve controversies, and finally, infrastructure for interconnection that can allow us to take the energy from A to B. The different regions of Latin America, Central America has done it faster. The Andean and the Cono Sur region have had more opportunities, and the Southern Cone, and especially Paraguay, has an emphasis on the joint exploitation of resources, of hydro resources. But if you look into the capacities of the interconnection, there's a sub-use of the network for integration, which would be indicating that either it could be, or it could show that the levels, there are more elevated expectations than what has ended up using. And that's because the conditions have not met for trading, or because there has been bad planning in the start. I think we need to move forward in the institutional framework and to make the energy trade to become a regional strategy for the countries. Finally, value chains. As I said in the beginning, a global value chain is the fragmentation or the separation of the production in different stages that can be carried out in different countries. And we classify this as a value chain, a regional value chain, when the product is done in the regions, and an extra regional value chain when it is done in the domestic economies and in countries outside the region, or in a mixed chain when the production process is done in the domestic country and countries in the region and outside the region. So how has the participation been in the regional chains and extra regional chains, value chains in Latin America? Well, here we see some patterns. On the one hand, Bolivia, Paraguay, and Mexico have a more important participation in regional value chains. Mexico, after their insertion with the neighbors in the north, Canada in the US, and Bolivia and Paraguay, because of their exporters mainly of energy resources to the neighboring countries. In extra-regional value chains, there are two patterns. One is the countries that finance productive processes, such as the ones in Central America, and other countries such that are more in South America, like Ecuador, Chile, or Venezuela, that provide goods and assets and have a participation that is called forward. I mean, they provide resources to the other countries out of the region in this case, mainly as of mining and oil and gas, as in the case of Venezuela. And the other countries, well, the global chains are more important than the regional chains, but they are still, or their participation is still quite low. So what can we do to promote the participation in global value chains? Well, on the one hand, work in the laws of the origin or the norms that determine the requirements so that an asset can be considered of national production. These rules cannot be strict, and they have to promote the use of resources that come from other countries of the region, and they have to allow the accumulation of the different agreements signed in the countries of the region, and also foreign direct investment, vertical foreign direct investment that promotes the global value chains, and also um, the knowledge, passing down of knowledge from supplier to clients. And that's why it's important to have openness and trust. There's other regimes such as customs and free trade zones, which could promote the production integration or productive integration, but regulations are important because the services is important for global value chains, especially with what has to do with transport, logistics, telecommunications, and the financial sector. So to wrap up, the report proposes the commercial integration as a strategy that would allow the expansion of the markets of the countries, promoting profit and scale economies, encouraging productivity, but many times it could require compensation between regions. The signing of different agreements in Latin America has allowed that most of the trade is free of these tariffs, and as a result of this, um, other infrastructure works that were complementary, has, such as the hydro in the Paraguay, has been one of the economies that has had the most momentum with foreign trade. No, but this has not been the case for trade of the region in general, where there has been an increase of trade, especially because of the low movement. The report is pragmatic in three dimensions. The facilitation of trade, infrastructure of connections and transport, and regulations to encourage the production. Paraguay has room for improvement, as we have seen, and it's got opportunities in what is related to facilitation of trade and infrastructure. And we could also, and also could attract other companies for direct investment that could be a vehicle to continue integrating the economy of Paraguay to the rest of the world. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Ria. We're going to invite now Mr. Jorge Pedraza. He's Secretary General of the Andean Community. He is also a lawyer from the University Nacional de Colombia with a postgraduate from the Management Territorial Entity of the Oecd and studies in diplomacy and international relations from the University of Jorge Tadeo in Bogota. Mr. Pedraza will offer us some reflections and comments on the report. We will now give the floor to Jorge Pedraza.
La viceministro Haas.
Muchas gracias. Permítanme
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank to the president of CAF, Sergio Granados, my friend, and I commend to president and the regional director from Colombia, Minister of Treasury of Paraguay, Mr. Llamosas. Thank you for being here. Congratulations for all these indexes that you have pointed out. Paraguay is going on a good path. And greetings to all the executives that are from the bank that are here. And this is very important scenario of the report of the economies and development pathways to facilitate trading infrastructures and change of values. I would like to reiterate my appreciation as the secretary of the Andean community. These are the topics that we've been putting as a priority since I arrived, because we understand the agenda that it's looking for the community from the Andes to be dynamic, and we don't have any delay. Goes through these 3 points, and also the transferability and the digital area in all the aspects of the topics that the whole humanity is forced, because digitalization is now there. That's why I've been taking notes, and I would like to commend you, Mr. Leon, for your presentation. That's very synthetic. I received the book in a normal size, and now I see the other part, the other version live. So hello, and I'm so happy that this event is here in Paraguay, because Paraguay is associate of CAF, and also it's part of the Mercosur and the Andean that are integrating systems more than ever for Latin America, along with others. Of course, Alianza Pacifico, SELEC, and us as the Andina community, we are forced to create denominators that are common, and so we can gain some terrain in a moment that the whole world is going through something difficult. I would like to highlight something. As I was saying, this has been developing in an incredible way, including due to the pandemic, despite the pandemic, and we still have some limitations. We don't know what type of effects specifically we will have in the economy, what's going on in Ukraine, because that we will have some problems in the markets, and maybe there will be also opportunities, but something is going to happen due to this conflict. And in the middle of this, I would like to present some numbers from 2021 that allowed to most of the nation to reactivate but naturally it demands from us additional efforts so we can start growing, so we can get more employment and strengthen those sectors that were more affected, and to generate opportunities. Lastly, I want to tell you, as the President Granados was saying, we have a brotherhood, we have a brotherhood of blood and for purposes because it's the same, which is the integration of our infrastructure to be able to find the well-being of the society. And this is why we work, so we can give quality of life to the Andine population. So we have in front of the world,
Portamos el año 2019
we export 120,000 dollars that we had to strengthen. And this report is a fresh report. We shared 150%. And also because it formulates some lines of actions and opportunities, considering a vision of what we should do when it comes to integration, economy integration, and obviously social as well, because there is social integration, or in our within our countries, and support the economic growth that we needed so much. So I would like to highlight some aspects. We have been working the same way. There is another title that is very similar, and I'm very happy to have received this invitation. We also have this report, and it has to do with value change when it comes to regional and global. It's very similar to your report, what we are living in or forward. One of them is the energy integration. We have agreed with the decision. That's the regulation that it's enforced right away is the CINEA. That is the sub-regional agreement in energy within the Peru, Colombia, or country, and Chile, to try to find the strength in the region so we can do better trading and create conditions that will allow us to be some virtual exporters of energy, or maybe we have the possibility to be helping each other or feeding each other. And that's why we have been progressing a lot in this as a priority that has to do with the demands of the growing of the population, the cities, and artificial intelligence, everything that has to do also with the availability of energy. And that should be fundamental for those who are planning the infrastructure. And that's why I'm saying hello to the Minister from Transportation and all the ministers that are so important from Paraguay. There is not any topic that is more important, and this factor affect all the importation and exportations. And when it comes to the region sector, if we don't create different regulations, elements that will facilitate, for example, during the pandemic was a big opportunity because accelerate of anti strategy, because we had to start doing things that we were planning to do. For example, avoid physical documentation of bureaucracy, to stop using paper and made it all through digital, and we shortened some processes. And now they are forever here. They were implemented due to the pandemic. And you were mentioning it with the OAS and the CAF, and we will be able to progress thanks to that because we have a support with an agreement of no reimbursement of support with the CAF, and we're closing that today so we can have this the intercom as an advisor to be able to facilitate the trading. We are not doing it in talk, we are also doing it in practice. And I appreciate the support because we will have this in probably before 15 minutes at the service of all the Colombia, Ecuadorian markets so we can create more elements that are more effective. And we are progressing in the building of the agenda of development of the Latin America. And we are next to be the second in the technology platform of vigilance and control of the environment. We coincide with the policies of the bank and with the role in the global organizations and the way they are administering the countries, the informations and the communications and everything that has to do with the environment, biodiversity, and the change climate, everything that has to do with the environment. That's why we are in this process, creating our technology that has to do with the environment and be able to have a monitoring center and support to all of our territory. And the third aspect that I would like to mention, and of course, it's in our report, it has to do with the transportation that you mentioned, Professor Liam, in a very methodological and descriptive and perfectly way of what is really happening. If we don't have the infrastructure for transportation, it takes away our competitiveness. We make our merchandise more expensive, and we cannot have a high standard in quality because there's our products that we are exporting and they come from the agriculture. And this generates costs for the exporters, for the travelers as well, for the operators, and increase the times of movement of this merchandise and also the efforts that we should do. This is an aspect that we have to quickly improve in an agreement that will put us all together. I think that the common denominators and also that Mercosur, Alianza Pacífico, and RACAL could determine or could join so we can make Latin America economy or South America economy in this time in the world to have the opportunity to be leaders in the world. In the CAF, I say we cannot generate a competition with China, Japan when it comes to technology. But if three aspects are improved, we can be, without any doubt, a food provider for the planet without compromising the environment. We have this strength. And in the end, this is why we were born to facilitate the trade, the infrastructure, and the agenda and all the aspects that are going to allow us to improve the quality of life of human beings. When we talk about the technological digital agenda, that is not that we try to close that gap. That's just one step to achieve to the end of closing that gap with this social aspect, which is fundamental. So when it comes to transportation, we have progress, having a new committee, creating regulations, and also in the airspace. Did you know the digital area we will able to do even decreasing the cost of roaming? And since this year, at 100%, so communication between Colombia, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Peru, we used to get cost a lot of money, and this affect the 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 wallet of everyone. But now it can be a local call if you go to another country. I don't know if this is the place to tell this, but why cannot try that those costs can help, and so we can do maybe encourage tourism and have more travelers, and we can have more resources, and it can be distributive to many sectors that are in the chain, and it will be affected in a direct way. We're also doing, we have just approved the regulation on land transfer, and if at the exit of vehicles for tourists, if for 180 days, they don't have any requirement, they don't have to pay extra, they don't have any obstacle. That's a regulation that will allow us to integrate physically faster, and it's at your service right now. And finally, I would like to refer your exposition about the net that we also have in our region, and obviously goes through the value changes. We want to strengthen the small and medium companies. There are 90% of our companies in the AGM community, and they are generating more than 60% of employment in our region. So they become main actors and key actors to be able to generate policies to encourage the reactivation of the economy and a better activity of production and trading of all the products as a value, added value. Now we had to protect of value change in a regional level, and also encourage them from the fundamentals, so we can be competitive outside. So in January, we created this report. Carolina, I'm gonna leave it with you. I have the support of Vital, and we identify three key issues. First has to do with chemical products, cosmetic and cleaning products, and the second has to be with processed food we import and also we export, and the third that has to do with informatic services. If we strengthen these three aspects, we will be strengthening our project of create a very strong value chain. So in that order, we can contribute to strengthen the project, and also these small companies that are main part of our economic activity. We are in a moment in which we had to take on this challenge to give back the trust to the people, so we can create a future of fidelity and confront inequality. We had to implement policies that are coordinated always among our countries, and with the support of institutions that are key, like the CAF. So we can invest in health, in education, and infrastructure, and in renewable energy, even digital. And I keep saying it's a sustainable growth in the, and with this, I would like to reiterate our commitment from the Andean community with our countries, with our citizens, and also that we are also open to create conditions of integration with all the bodies that are in Latin America. And when, as soon as our presidents, also the integration with all the brotherhood that means a continent of Latin America and especially South America to be the protagonist of the next years and be a leader when it comes to economy so we can improve the quality of life of our citizens. Thank you very much.
Agradecemos.
Thank you, Liam, for the presentation of the report and to the Secretary General Pedraza for his comments. I would like to remind you, if you're still not doing this, you can follow us in at Agenda CAF on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and you can leave your comments with the hashtag CAF. Now we're going to be listen to the panel discussion of Paraguay economic integration with the moderated by Mr. Ernesto Shadrowski, Director of Socioeconomic Research by Harvard, also economics in PhD in economics from Harvard. He holds a BA in economics from the University of Buenos Aires and economics from Harvard as well. And also we're going to invite to the panelists so they can join us in this discussion.
¿Cuáles son los principales
What are the main challenges?
Muy buenos días a todos.
Good morning, everyone. My greetings to all the authorities of the government of Paraguay and CAF. It's a pleasure to be here moderating this panel about economical integration of Paraguay in the Red 2021 of CAF. Today we have the Minister of Works, Arnaldo Lins. Arnaldo has a doctorate in theology from the International Seminary of Buenos Aires. He drives Siglo a Siglo by Guarani Thread for 9 years. He was a pre-candidate for president of the Republic of Paraguay, president of the Colorado Party, and he is also a member of the Parliament of the Mercosur, and he's member of the International Organization of Faith. We also have Ivan Paz. He's Vice Minister of the Ministry of Treasury. He is a Master of Economy in the University of Chile and also didactics for the National University, where he teaches. In February of 2016, he was the chief of all tools of financial and devs of the subsecretary of economy and also the dev section. Now we also have Karina Gaftar. She's the president of the CENMAP. She is a master in business with a BA in international economy from Norwich University. She's a partner of women in business of the Mercosur, and she's also part of Logia Kim Corporation. She is part of the Australian Trading for the Industry and Service. Sonia Tomasone, she's also a member of the panel. She's the director of the importation. She's an advisor of CAPECO, a main member of the trade, and also of the German chairman. She has more than 20 years. She has some studies, and she also is with the Chamber of Commerce with other blocks and negotiations that has to do with free trading. And lastly, we have Joel Branski, the representative of CAF in Paraguay. He is here since 2016, representing Trinidad and Tobago. Before, he was in IDB in Bolivia, Venezuela, and Barbados. When it comes to the academic, he was a professor in the University of Sao Paulo and Texas University. He is a civil engineer from Sao Paulo University and hydroelectric hydrology engineer. He also has a postgraduate in hydrate resources from the Texas University. Thank you all for being with us in this panel where we will be talking about the economy integration of Paraguay concerning Oecd 2021. I'm going to start with a question for you, Minister Vince. A report of 2021 finds that Paraguay has some decrease in the transportation area considering the region and infrastructure, as we mentioned. Consider the importance of land transportation in Paraguay, and we will talk about the waterway. This could be a barrier for international commerce. 10% of the companies consider this as a big barrier for the trading. From the minister, do you have the same vision? And in particular, which are the more relevant works that are being done or could be done to face this problem? Good morning. Thank you for the possibility to participate. Paraguay for decades been behind when it comes to infrastructure. We have some integration programs. We have a very clear road map, and we have double the investment in public infrastructure. One example is the trend that Paraguay has put with the bioceanic transatlantic way. This is the more important in the next years, and you can only compare it to the Panama Channel today. And in that agreement in 2015, of all the four countries, Argentina, Chile, Brazil, and Paraguay, we established what tasks each country needs to do so we can have this logistic route can be developed. Paraguay has $100 million to be able to create this, and we have already invested $450 million, which is the first stage of the corridor, 250 kilometers, 1,000 kilometers, and the bridge between Carmelo Peralta and Puerto Mortiño that's starting to build. In the Congress, we have the loan of for $350 million that is going to put Mariscal Estigarribia con Pozo Hondo and the improvement of the bridge on the Pilcomayo. And Paraguay is going to have a logistic corridor that is going to generate this flux of merchandise among the biggest states like Brazil, from Mato Grosso do Sul to the ports of the Pacific. Through this corridor, Paraguay is going to connect to the two oceans. Besides that, we are rebuilding the route in the Chaco that's going to help to connect to this corridor. Same the route from Concepcion to Pozo Colorado is going to be linked. Considering the region, we have the duplication of Route 2 with one of the strategic points of connectivity today. We already doubled Ciudad del Este towards Caguasu, and now we are 70% ahead from Caguasu to Upacaraí. That's going to decrease the time and increase the time of the logistic. The second bridge between Paraguay and Brazil, between Foz do Iguaçu and Presidente Franco, is going to generate the logistic corridor in the whole productive area of, of the south part of Paraguay. It's going to connect the exportation of Itapúa and Alto Paraná. It's going to have two corridors, the corridor of exportation, the sixth route that is already there, and the exportation is the route is going to be finished next month, and the metropolitan corridor that is going to join these two corridors and Route 2 and the super highway that goes from Curuguatu. So we're going to have a solution of one of the nodes that were mentioned in infrastructure. And the waterway, I will talk later. But when it comes to infrastructure, our country has progress a lot when it comes to investment, and hopefully we can keep up with this same investment, and we can go for 400 to 500 millions of dollars per year to 800 to 1,000 million dollars. That's our objective, so we can stop being in the last parts in the index. Thank you, Minister. My question is now to the Vice Minister of Economy of Paraguay. Something that the report said, and you can apply it to Paraguay, is that the tariffs were decreased between 2000 and 2006 from about 14%. And not, and they keep that away. And it is similar for Latin America. So for the whole region, we are above the levels of more developed nations that are part of the OECD. The tariffs with Mexico are still very high when the regional it's practically free of tariff. Is there any agenda in the Ministry of Economy to go back to that tariff, and to what level Mercosur have facilitated these negotiations, especially with countries that are outside of it? First of all, welcome to all the members of the CAS and our guests. When we were talking about regional integration, we have several axes. We have infrastructure, the Minister of Work was mentioning, and the other big axis is the tariffs. Paraguay has always been a country that has a conviction that the tariffs had to be low, so this can generate more competitiveness and productivity to the whole regional trading. You mentioned 2006. We have a reduction of all the tariffs of Paraguay. They decreased about 11% or 8.5%, and that stayed there that time. But this agenda, it was again retaken with a group of GMC was advising to the Mercosur, and that's a study of the tariff of the Mercosur. Why are we doing this? Basically, we were seeing it in the presentation. Our average tariff are above of the OECD and other countries. We have progress in had some progress in these studies from 2019 in a technical level. And again, I repeat, Paraguay knows that it has to reduce the tariff, but up until today, we have not have a consensus in the political level because a reduction of the tariffs had to do with a lot of things. In short term, this gonna hit the government income, and we still have to talk in the Mercosur some discussions. Paraguay is the president for now of the Mercosur all this semester of 2022, and the main concern and the main goal is to start again these discussions and achieve to a consensus. So from the Ministry of Treasury, we will do what we can. And also we have the common trading tariff. The name said common. This is a long and medium term objective because we have working on it. And how can we identify these states? These modalities are special. For example, the maquila, maybe I can explain that with more detail. The free duty areas. So each thing have a special uh, section so we can achieve to a common tariff, and this special were extended to 2030 for all the countries that are members of the Mercosur, which gives some tranquility and a vision of short and long term for all those companies that have invested in these special tasks or industries. Thank you, Ivan. In this panel, we will also wanted to listen to the private sector voices. So I would like to ask Karina Lasser, who is the president of all the maquila companies in Paraguay. Our report has three pillars for the integration in the region: to facilitate the trading, transportation, and also adequation of all the regulations for the production. And then we have other policies that affect the business and that might be important when it comes to foreign companies or the development of local companies that would like to start in value chain. As per your understanding, which are the priority areas to work in order to create this integration with the maquila companies in Paraguay? I also thankful for the invitation. I feel part of the family of CAF just to try to illustrate the origin of maquila. I would like to talk about the regulation in 1997. That's 25 years. I said approximately because it was actually put in force in 22, 23 years ago. This is a economy tool that is emerging in Paraguay, relatively new, and this growth happened slowly. We have about 2 or 3 companies that were joining the maquila regime or regulations. And then we started working with the private sector. We were telling these institutions about the trainings that we were doing, the investment in infrastructure that we were doing, and the quantity and quality of employment that we were given to the society, and the improvement that every industry, new industry, came here. So this growth of 2 to 3 per year in the beginning have to 32 to 35 new industries that came to Paraguay, and most of them are joint ventures, so are national products, and they have a partnership in overseas, and they create this synergy, and they create this productive platform where these clients overseas can keep having their clients from Europe, Asia. So our job of synergy was very great, and the reaction was very positive, and it allowed us to grow. And that's why, going back to your question, the joint work that we are doing with our union, the Ministry of uh, Commerce, it's great. And this synergy is allowing us to have 27,000 employments that are direct and indirect employments, and about 40 companies that are working under Maquila. It's an exponential growth that are going to 72 millions of dollars in exportations. Last month, we closed with 800 millions of dollars per year, and I think we are going to surpass this amount. So this is not just this is the cost of our work. Thank you, Karina. One of the main topics of this report has to do with facilitated trade. So it's very important to have Sonia Tomasona here as the director of Consorcio of Exportation. The facilitation of trading, it's important to reduce their costs. Automation, making the processes faster in order to do export. It's very important. Paraguay, when it comes to automatization and cooperation with the border inside and outside, it's behind. So this could be a barrier for the change values and exchange of goods. I would like to ask you, what actions do you think are being done and able to overcome this barrier? The participation from the government and the private sector, it allows to Paraguay to have the buses that were created by the technicians from the country. Okay, she's going to change the microphone because we cannot listen to her very clearly. We have had some award from international awards for this private, public, private, where 3 union, CAPECO, CAPEX, and we joined to be able to give sustainability and make to grow our exports. 90% of the processes are digital. We have electronic payment, origin certificates of origin that are digital, and other tasks. The operator is authorized, and we are advancing with no new models that have to do with maquila fraud. And this thankful to the state, and because the government and the private sector, and sometimes the private sector gives the push of the drive that the government cannot make it happen faster. So it's a marriage practically between the public and private sector. And we also launching, since you talk about the information, I think that we have, and this is a problem that we have to solve. We have a very big problem of communication. We don't know how to communicate the things that are being done in the sole window of exterior commerce. So all the unions know, or the groups know, but we don't know how to communicate this outside of the group. We're trying to solve it through a sole or website that we will be launching soon. We are working inside the panel of trading facilitation, which those models that were in B and C category, now most of them are in A category, complying with the facilitation of the trading of the World Trade Organization. And this is integrated by all the public bodies and also the private sector. So it's a joint venture between the public and the private. It's what it's showing that works, so we can push forward our country. 90% of all the export and imports are being done through the computer. The pandemic was our challenge. Thanks to this digitalization, we have not have any delay in the border. On the contrary, it was an opportunity, as one person said before, when certain countries that were a little bit behind and to try to use the software after this pandemic, they were able to implement it right away. And now we have more agreements with more countries when it comes to digital certificates. So Paraguay is also working well. We're complying with most of the agreement of facilitating trading. And this model of joint venture between the public sector and the private sector allow Paraguay to export to certain countries of the region. And this also shows how difficult it was in the beginning. And Karina is laughing at this, but we have overcome many barriers, and we are working very aligned with the government, and we actually push forward. So it's a model that works, is a model that we can, that allow us to export in the region, and we keep going forward. We're not stopping in the achievements that we able to get. We keep improving our processes, as you mentioned, information. Soon we will launch the export help from the European Union. We still don't have the name in Spanish. That's why we haven't launched it with that name. This is going to facilitate that a small, medium, and big company can have information of what kind of processes they have to go through to be able to export their products, and also what the market of destiny is requesting, and also the tariff, so they can do a market study before. and that information is going to be very useful for the companies. So again, we keep going forward on these topics, and we keep incorporating non-modules, because another topic that we realize of is that we cannot only think about import, export, and information. We have to go back a little bit and facilitate the to open companies, and we work very together with the tax agency to formalize the companies. These are previous processes before exporting, and this is all being integrated in the same system of the bus. Thank you, Sonia. Now a question from CAF to CAF, from Joel Braski, or representative in Paraguay. Joel, the report, as I was saying, have three areas, main areas to strengthen the regional integration: trade facilitation, infrastructure, and interconnection, considering energy and all the regulations that had to do with the production and, and global value change. Can you tell us how CAF is supporting Paraguay in these areas? I'm asking you right now everything that has to do with transportation. Thank you, Ernesto. Thank you, everyone. CAF, Paraguay has 25 years as part of CAF, and Paraguay has a very strong relationship, especially the last 10 years when it became a full member. When it comes to infrastructure for the integration, and the energy has been very important to support what the government of Paraguay is doing, what the Minister Vince mentioned. We basically are supporting all these initiatives of integration. I have a few projects that I think are more significant, and I would like to mention them to do. Some of them, the minister already mentioned it. We are supporting the government in this effort to be able to develop their infrastructure for integration. We have the route number 9 that connects Asunción with Viamontes in Bolivia through the border, Bolivia. That
Esa foto que veio na esquerda,
what you see on the left, I took it in 1999, and that was the connection between the Chaco from Paraguay and Bolivia. It could take you 1 day, 2 days, several days to arrive. And on the right, you can see today. And beyond that, we have an effort to repair road number 9, about 700 kilometers between Asunción and Bolivia. The next, please. These are connections with Brazil. Some of them were already mentioned. On the north, we have Ipejú and Puerto Indio, and below, a connection that is going to allow access for Paraguay on the second bridge on the Paraná River that will change the current situation of the maquila companies, because right now it can take 1 day or 2 days to get to Brazil, because there is only one bridge that it's being used for transfer of people or other type of merchandise, and it could take 2 or 3 days, and there are products that have to get there before they expires. The produce. We are working with the Ministry of Work to create or to build this second bridge that will change the region and all the development of the industry there. Here you see important routes that are national routes. I'm going to pass this very quickly.
Estos puntitos son caminos
These points are very important because these are small bridges inside the country. This also allows the producers to be able to sell their products or export and also receive the material that they need to produce.
Y aquí quisiera la
And here,
complementar
just to complement a little, I don't know if this is the time to talk about energy or this is another part. We will leave it for the next question. Thank you, Joel. I would like to go back to Minister Beans. It's very interesting, all the developments when it comes to the land transportation and the interoceanic corridor. I would like to ask you about the waterway. It's an important way for the export of Paraguay through the Paraná, and it's been a factor for the development of the agriculture in the south of Paraguay. When it comes to infrastructure, what kind of works, additional works, could you do to improve the access, the connections, and the storage part that connects this waterway? I don't know if we could put again the map of Paraguay so we can see what is the waterway. The waterway is for the commerce of Paraguay when it comes to import and export is the most important. Paraguay River and Paraná River. In Paraguay River, we have 3 divisions. We have the Soberano Point from Asunción to Rio Apa, River Apa. In that way, we have a prefactibility. It's gonna add permanent maintenance. Today, we cannot do that. We don't have the signal signs. And from the ministry, we're doing the citations,
the bids to understand the feasibility so that later we can proceed to a bid process. The shared part with Argentina from Asunción to the Paraná-Paraguay River is very progressed. We've been talking with Foreign Affairs, with COMIP, that is the joint organization with Paraguay and Argentina, where there's high interest of the private sector in investing. We precisely need to work together, Paraguay and Argentina, so that we can move forward with the feasibility and pre-feasibility with the bottleneck for us. The biggest bottleneck is the shared Paraguay-Argentina area, because we have the need of planning and have clear signs and navigability 24 hours a day. We've had 3 very hard years of historical low rivers, the Paraná and Paraguay waters. That also affects generation of energy. It has been devastating for the funds because there's no profits for the country, and the navigability, of course. Thanks to that, we have maintained a large part of the Paraguay River navigable, but we are building infrastructure from Paraguay, Villeta, all the way to Pilar. We will have, for next year, a route full-time so that the products can reach the ports of Pilar that are deeper waters when the barges cannot make it to Villeta. They will be able to make it to Pilar, from where we will be able to bring the goods or to take it by a parallel road, parallel to the Paraguay River, so that we can shorten the gap from Villa Rosario, going through San Pedro in Comandillú, towards Belén and Concepcion. We are starting on the one hand with the bid, then with FOSEM, in 6 different areas, another parallel road to the Paraguay River on the western area. And Concepcion, we've already got stretch to Vallemis. So therefore, we have covered the logistics of road infrastructure that is parallel to the Paraguay River from the western region. With JICA, we are also studying to continue the route that we already did. We are almost finishing the exportation corridor, the export corridor, sorry, from Paraguay to Paraná. We're doing the pre-feasibility study from Ayolas to Pilar. So we would unite another corridor, land corridor parallel to the Paraná River, so that that can facilitate the traffic of logistics of goods, so that we can use the ports that we already have on the Paraná River and the Paraguay River. With CAF, we are working in the possibility of doing the designs of 2 corridors, strategic corridors, one is from the kilometer 50 of the Transchaco Road, parallel to the Paraguay Road, that goes out close to Concepcion. We would save about 150 kilometers of going all the way to Pozo Colorado, then Concepcion. We are working together with the ANDE on this, so that we can use the new corridor. And from Cagupu to Pilar, Alverde Pilar, that would go waters up the Huicaru River, one in the west and one on the east. That would allow the connection of Route 1, Road 19, which is Alverde Pilar, and the other one parallel to the Paraguay River. So we would also work on asphalt roads that will allow. Very interesting, Minister. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I go back to Ivan Haas, so that the imports in Paraguay show a lot of raw goods with low differentiation of technology. So this reduces the possibilities of exporting with higher added value. Nonetheless, many of these goods do have a potential of differentiating them, such as the exports of raw goods, raw materials, could be developed through quality standards. And what is the Vice Ministry thinking? What strategy is there? Are there programs for the exporting companies to add value to their products, starting from, for example, adding services or better labels and packaging, traceability of the product, brand development? Thank you, Ernesto. What you're saying, yes, it's a reality. The exports, they're still a priority. I mean, I see this more as an opportunity to improve these analysis per layer. And that is where I think that the work of the public sector is fundamental when we talk about market openness. As a matter of fact, there has been strong work of all of the institutions involved, from Foreign Affairs, Ministry of the Treasury, MIC, in the openness of different markets. And that is how Paraguay today, we've got an example. The beef exports, that Paraguay has a large quota of exports. Fortunately, there are other markets, open markets. This cannot be done immediately, can't do this from one day to another. But there is a possibility, thanks to the work that was done previously. And I would also like to mention that Paraguay has known how to make the best of these open markets. If we look at some of Paraguay has known how to make the best of this also outside the area. If we add all of this openness and these platforms, we can say that 85% of the exports of Paraguay use some of these channels that are already open. And this is a big challenge of the public sector, to work on the openness for all of the companies that want to export their products. With regards to the programs, the main program is REDIEX, which was designed with the government and multilateral organism, with, in this case, is the IDB. This is led by the Ministry of Industry and Trade, and this what this program does is it helps the companies. First of all, it supports them to certify, to promote themselves in international conferences, and so the companies can adapt to this type of labeling with the international standards. So this program helps the companies with the partial financing of these activities, depending on the type of project or the type of product. This this project has been working very well. There's always room for improvement. So those are the two main challenges. Aim at the constant openness of the markets first, and in the second place, also the support to the companies. Thank you, Ivan. Also very interesting. Now I go back to Karina Daer. The report finds a low participation in regional change value chains for most of the countries of our region. In the case of Paraguay, there is a forward participation in regional chains and global chains, exporting basic supplies that are later transformed by other countries. Also, I see that the levels of foreign investment, direct investment with regards to the GDP in Paraguay are low with regards to other countries in the region. What do you think is missing? On the one hand, to deepen the value, the insertion in the value chains, and also to achieve, to attract, to contribute to this better insertion. Well, last year we started to talk to all institutions involved of Maquila. That's why we bothered the Minister of Trade and Labor Union and the Central Bank and and obviously Ministry of Industry and Trade, trying to raise awareness that the regime by 2023 could not be left. We could not procrastinate. We're talking about projection, we're talking about planning, and a lot of investment, not only money. Pandemics has taught us to work in different ways, such as in small squads. Maquila is labor intensive. We don't have a lot of machines in our industries. Our biggest added value to the country as an economic regime is formalizing jobs, to provide labor, to train people. And therefore, we are a bit concerned because we only had 2 years left for the revision, and mainly the investors that contacted us saying, will the regime be extended or not? Because we cannot plan for 2 years of investment. Or those that were already set up here had to have an idea of how this would be carried out for more investment or more people or more training or what was going to happen. So Noblesse, we had to, as the Vice Minister said, we had an extension. It was great work of the technical team that negotiated this, of everyone that makes it up, of the ministries. And in December of last year, we managed to get an extension to 2030. From here on, I believe we are doing great. We are focused on an agenda with REDIEX so that we can be, or we can attract investment for the countries in the North Asia, Europe. We're very competitive, not only in cost, but also in efficiency of personnel. Paraguayans are hard workers, and they always surpass the expectations for the efficiency, and that's treasured by foreigners who come and invest in Paraguay. So from now on, we have a joint agenda to support the work that the government does, and we have had a participation, because what does a businessman or investor want? When we talk about here their countries, what do they want? They want to talk to other businessmen, to other investors, to see if it really works, if this is such, if can you help me? Can you open the doors? Can you show me your industry? Can I see your factory? Can I see how it works? What's the taxes like, the tax system like? So it's just like the operative matters, and that is where we come in as to work with what is going on and to make sure that this growth can continue being exponential. So answering your question, we will work now together identifying big companies and companies that can support the job creation and training. And 75% of the maquila industries have staff that is female. That is also something that has to be encouraged and acknowledged. And people have to know the first job and the integration of female labor. Thank you.
Vuelvo ahora a Sonia Tomasone.
Going back to Sonia Tomasone, the facilitation of trade has a characteristic of being similar to reduction in least favored nations, because they affect the flows without the origin or destination. But the closeness can allow to deepen these measures with joint efforts, such as the mutual acknowledgement of economic operators or the interoperability of the sole windows. How can the Mercosur and other agreements that Paraguay has with the rest of the nations in the region, how have they moved forward? And do you consider that it's relevant to reduce the costs of importing and exporting into and out of Paraguay with the countries in the region? Very interesting question. The interconnection is fundamental. According to our experience, or from our experience, you can have the best software, the best analysts, you can move fast in everything that has to do with IT, but then we get stuck in the interconnection with other countries. For example, when we implemented the electronic phytosanitary, we needed the approval of, let's go to soya. Soya has 53 markets. That's 53 countries that have to approve our system. So as I know that we are working in the WTO, we should think of some system to make the systems be the same. It's very difficult to have to talk to each country for them to acknowledge this. As again, it was very hard for us to connect to the Mercosur. With Argentina, yes, it was a bit easier. But this pandemics made it easier, or agilized, or got over all of the excuses, overcame all the excuses. Mercosur is a very important market for Paraguay, but it's not the only one. We need to connect with Peru, with Ecuador, with Central America, Europe, even Africa. And that mutual agreement, that interconnection of the buses takes a long time diplomatically, as well as technical issues. That is something that we have to think if it's an OMC level, at GAF, or some organism that we have. Today, we already have the implementation that is authorized, but the mutual acknowledgement. So that is pending work that not only have to be done by Paraguay, but also by the countries in the region. And we should begin to think in a system and how we can harmonize the systems. Thank you, Sonia. I'm going back to Joel now. Joel, I had asked you about the projects and what GAF is doing to Paraguay to support the regional integration.
Te quería preguntar ahora algo similar, pero referido a la...
I wanted to ask you something similar now, but with regards to the interconnection of energy and other projects that are related to this. Yeah, thank you. Here, the CAF role is very similar to the role that CAF has. We are supporting the initiatives of Paraguay in improving the system of integration. In the case of electricity or energy, we are the main cooperator of ANDE. About 40% of the connection that ANDE does is financed by CAF. And that investment is concentrated in transmission and distribution of energy and energy efficiency. And they are very relevant issues for the country and for the integration. I'll give you an example. The transmission, the process or part of the effort is we are one of the financiers that finance the transmission and the substations of ANDE that will allow the country to make 100% of the energy available or use the 100% of the energy that comes from Itaipu and that it can transport it and that it can add value to it, to the industries and re-export it so that it can send the energy through the hydroelectric power plants or other ways. So for it to have access to other markets. That's very important for the country. And it is a huge effort. We are very happy, very proud of this initiative. And another initiative that you see, for example, is the distribution of energy. There's many bottlenecks in the institution. There it is big work that the government does and the ANDE does to improve the efficiency, to expand the networks, to expand the reliability of the network, to digitize, modernize, and we are an important part of this efforts. So I think that it's two areas in which CAF has been working hard the last 10 years. The ideal infrastructure, and it's areas in which we will continue to support if the government decides, because it's fundamental for.
Muchas gracias, Joel.
Thank you, and
a todos los panelistas.
Thank you to all of the speakers. If I would have to make a summary, I think that we have added a lot of value to the discussion. In my case, it was quite interesting to learn, especially about all this progress that are being carried out, and that for sure will see the light in more integration of Paraguay with regard regionally and globally. So thank you so much, Minister Beans. Thank you, Vice Minister Haas, Ivan Haas, thank you, Karina Dar, Sonia Tomasone. Thank you, Joel. It was very interesting to talk to all of you.
Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias a los panelistas.
Thank you, everyone, for your participation in this panel for the morning. To conclude this first event in the framework of GAF's board and director of shareholders meeting taking place here in Asunción, we will begin the closing session. Next, we welcome Adriana Arreaza. She is the Knowledge Manager and Director of Macroeconomic Studies of CAF.
Muchas gracias. Buenos días.
Good morning. I would like to begin thanking everyone who participated and the authorities and the members of the board of CAF who are with us today, as well as the rest of the participants of this event, to present in Paraguay our flagship roads to integration. The report has a practical approach to encourage trade, starting of the existing agreements in the region, and it uses, and also the reduction of costs for trade and the logistics costs because of the infrastructure and interconnectivity. As a matter of fact, the limited participation in regional value chains explains the global trade in the region. And once that we remove tariffs, we see the weight that, or how much this weighs down on trade. In the case of Paraguay, there's logistic costs, as we saw in the presentation, and we also mentioned during the panel. Trade in Paraguay more than over doubled thanks to the hydroway construction that facilitated trade in the international markets. Likewise, something similar happened with the energy exports that encouraged with the construction of big hydroelectric power plants. Without a doubt, there still are opportunities and room for improvement in the country with regards to infrastructure. So as we saw in the panel, the construction of the Chaco, for example, facilitating trade. And we talked about the single or the solar windows and the importance of solar windows, and also integration of energy. All of this would be seen in the growth and the well-being of the nation. I only encourage you to read the report, and I hope that this report can enrich the public policies in the region and in the debate in Paraguay.
Muchísimas gracias, Adri.
Thank you very much, Adriana Reaza, for these words. And next, we will ask up Mr. Jorge Sur. He's a Southern Regional Manager, for him to give some closing words. Well, before anything, I want to also thank the minister, and I want to thank the government of Paraguay for having had us here to build together. I want to congratulate the authors of the report, Eliana, Ernesto, the teams, those that lead, Cristiana Ginelli and the manager. I want to thank everyone who just had something to do in the discussion, which was so wonderful, and everybody who came, especially Jorge Pedraza. And without the feedback of all of you, this report would not have been as rich as we wanted it to be. As our president, Sergio Díaz Granados, always mentions, from CAF, we do not want to give lessons, but simply we just come to learn together and to do more and better together with our member countries. And it has been wonderful to come and talk about the integration in Asunción, a city that 3 decades ago was chosen by the areas of Latin America and the Caribbean because it was a capital of integration. Here, we signed the Treaty of the Mercosur, which was the most challenging collective agreement since independence. It persists, and the Mercosur was not the first or the last of the agreements to manage the integration. And there's many agreements that were done, there's many norms that were built upon in the regional and country level, but interregional trade, as the report shows, is well below of what we expected and what other countries in the region have achieved. And with the quality and amount of the integration, there's been a big leap. We've had a panel that was very rich from the practice, from the decision makers that every day are out in the field working to make this come true. The Minister Veens, Vice Minister has shown us the restrictions that the institution has, the regions in general, in the case of Mercosur, but not only Mercosur, and also how they are building to working to build in Paraguay fiscal order, business climate, and the physical infrastructure required by this integration process. So Karina Adar and Soneto Mazzone, from their experience in production and trade, showed us how innovation and collaboration with public and private, of course, the gender perspective, are helping make Paraguay a key actor in our region. And finally, Joe, from the wisdom of his years and now as a representative of our bank in Paraguay, how CAF is contributing towards these processes side to side with the country. And allow me to wrap up simply by saying very briefly with what I consider to be a key aspect, a limit of something that is limiting the processes in the region, that is the problem of trust. In our region, we've got more intelligence and will to draft good norms, but not to comply with them. Sometimes a small print is more important than the big print. Many times the exceptions become a rule, and what is provisionary or temporary becomes permanent. We have a great challenge ahead, that is to comply with what we agreed. Francisco de Quevedo said that nobody offers so much as he who knows that he cannot comply or meet with. When I was growing up as a child, I always heard my dad saying often, it's better to say I'll give you one that I promise to give you two. So trust is key to the progress of trade. And trust is built upon facts and not so much with ink on paper. We can draft all the norms in the world, but if we do not trust each other, we won't go anywhere. And from CAF, we believe that we do want to increase trust, not only with financing or with technical assistance or knowledge, but also we can contribute to create bridges of trust between sectors so that we can move forward in the regional integration. That's why we are here for. That is what we commit to. And thank you, everyone.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much, Jorge and Adriana, for this closing speech. Also, it was an interesting exchange of the speakers and a fruitful conversation. On behalf of CAF, Development Bank of Latin America, and the Ministry of the Treasury of Paraguay, I would like to thank all of those who joined us throughout the day. I remind you that the Red 2021 report is now available for free download at www.scioteca.caf.com. And if you would like to watch any of these sessions again, because you may be missed out on any of them, they will be recorded on our webpage, caf.com, or on our YouTube channel. Thank you very much and have a great day. Outside, there's coffee, water, because it was a long day. Thank you.